You know, we're really lucky with all the tools and ideas that we have at our disposal today to recreate a lot of things we need to do. And as I wrap up a few of the projects, including an older one, a couple older ones actually, that needed some bases, I'd had this Cricut on order for a while, and when it finally showed up over Christmas, I hadn't used it yet this year, and I finally busted it out and decided to give it a shot. And the reason for this is I really wanted a homemade mass stencil device here at home for things of this nature, which particularly would be displays and whatnot. And so I have an art store up the street, one of the Blicks here in the States, and you probably have something similar in your city too. And they sell these kind of like wood plinths or art panels, as they call them, for various needs for the artists and stuff and creatives. And the sizes are really good for a lot of what we do. And I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool to, see if I can paint this with the mask markings and stuff on it to create a new display base for a couple of my pieces that I have that are in going to a collector's possession. The Cricut stencil cutter, it's probably not a professional level. If you're making masks and stencils for a living, if you have a company that does that or anything, like, you probably have a much better device. But for homework, for home work at home conversation, this is a really, really cool device and not that expensive. They're very, very popular. They're all over Amazon. Silhouette cutters, Cricut cutters, things of this nature. So I wanted to see what they're truly capable of here, and I've probably put it through some pretty tough paces, using some pretty small text graphics for the display purpose. And my intention of this is, as you saw in the opening photo there, is what I want to do is I want to have a white letter against a black wood base to really show off kind of the multicolor camo of the armor piece. To do that, you have to do what is called a reverse stencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down the positive letters after I paint the first color, and those positive letters will cover that up. And then I'm going to paint the second color and then remove the vinyl letters after that, so revealing the lower color. In this case, it's a very simple black and white motif, which is, fits in my brand colorway. And I thought the black popped the colors of the tank really nice, and the fact that it's going to go into someone's home, and the black base probably looks a little bit nicer in somebody else's home. And for RSP work and for some show work and stuff coming up, because SMC is just around the corner, in mid-October, I'm going to be doing a reverse version of this with the black lettering on a white base. But for now, I'm going to go through this process with you guys because it's really cool to see. The only real caveat is it does take some time in terms of, okay, we can make a base in less than about an hour, realistically, maybe 2 hours. This part here, though, is really, really tedious and slow, and you have to be methodical and take your time. The Cricut stencil mat there, the blue one, has a sticky surface, so it holds that tape down. And the way this all works is basically you do your vector file on a computer, and I use Adobe Illustrator because everything for my work is Adobe. But you can use any kind of vector file creator text program that you might have. As long as it outputs what they call an SVG file, you'll be okay. And then you'll import that file into the Cricut Cutter software on your computer. From there, it's real basic, and again, these are craft tools for the greater good, and so it's very simple. They're very well thought out. They work really well, and I use a removable vinyl material that I got off of Amazon for this purpose. And you want a removable one because the permanent vinyls are really difficult, obviously, to get off of the substrate, and so a removable one makes the process a little bit more streamlined. And of course, there is better material for this, but this is my second time ever using this device, and so I'm just kind of working up to it. It was mostly experimental. The T72 base came out so nicely, I decided to make a matching pair with my AMX30 because those two particular tanks reside in the same collector's hands, and I thought that would make a nice formal display for him. And so I filmed the second version. Really, the first one with the T72 was kind of a walkthrough to see how this all works, and the second one here is the AMX30, which is you're watching. And I'm using Pro Acryl paints on this one. It's a water-based acrylic, works great on the wood, and I'm using my Dash 68 pistol trigger airbrush from Gallery, which has been doing yeoman's work for this type of volume spraying, and it does an amazing job for the money, for 60 bucks. Beautiful airbrush, works fantastically well. And all I'm doing here is, because this is basically wood, I don't need to do any chip. I'm not doing anything fancy, guys, so don't get worked up on this one. This is just straight up making a base. So I'm going to lay down the white first. And I'll walk you guys through this because, again, it's a reverse process of what we would normally do for this type of work. So I lay down the white paint first, let that dry nicely, Get your hair dryer in there, cook it. You can see here, this is kind of what I'm going for. So I want to make sure because I'm doing 2, let's measure up kind of where I need to put my second stencil. So they kind of are, they're nice and even, and they look, pretty much identical when I'm done. So I'm just kind of doing some quick little pencil measurements and markings here for the stencil. And so what you got here is you have your vinyl mask. You've removed the outer carrier film to leave the positive letters stuck to the transfer tape. And the transfer tape with the grid lines allows you to line this up nice and evenly. And there's other ways to do it. Again, there's multiple versions of this type of process. So I know that there's other ways to do it. Now, this is just kind of what I was doing. The transfer tape is nice because what it does is it holds all these letters in position for the entire design to be. Otherwise, you're trying to line this up yourself individually. You'll never get it right. So the transfer tape is important because it flips the letters back over, holding everything in place. Then you lay it down onto your substrate, the painted white here in this case. You burnish it all down, and then you pull the transfer tape off, and that leaves the positive mask in place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and weed out the little tiny islands inside each of the letters I left there, because it was just a little bit easier to manage at this size. Typically when you watch the Cricut videos, the girls doing all the craft work and stuff like that, they don't go this small in terms of like the tank art lettering there and the modern word and armor there. These are pretty small in terms of what Cricut's capable of cutting out. And so it's a little bit easier to kind of reverse this process, use the transfer tape, get it down on your base, and then remove some of those small little windows. You can see there it comes out. It's pretty nice. I was real happy at this point in time. And then again, like I said, I mentioned I'm using the Procreate. And the reason, another reason for this paint too is that it's a really pure white and a really dark black, solid black for the tabletop gamers. And it's great airbrush paint for this type of a project, if you will, because you get a really pure black out of that. Easy to spray, no fumes, water-based, pure water-based. And I found that Pro Acryl, it's a US paint company by the way, responds superbly well to life color thinner. And I've also been told by some friends that it also works really, really well with all the Vallejo products too. So it's a nice in-between paint for stuff like this. And again, the 68 pistol trigger airbrush performs beautifully. You can see here, just laying down a really nice, even, thin layer on your first pass. That's really important when you're spraying over stencils, masks, whatever, because what you don't want is you don't want to flood the surface. I know a lot of you guys struggle with this process. You're basically trying to get an opaque color out of the gate too fast, and what you do is you build up your paint around the edges of all your masks, and it leaves a really thick ledge, and it just ruins the model of the project. So going really light on your first few passes, build up your color slowly. Don't try to rush flooding the paint down to get opacity. Build it up slowly, and then from there it's just painting a big block of wood, which is, like going outside and painting your house. So there's nothing really special at this point in time in terms of anything else that I'm doing. But you can also see too the atomization and everything here. I mean, talking about the new airbrush, and it's kind of a secondary conversation. Galleries, airbrushes, if you're not on the gallery airbrush train yet, you hop on, because we're all aboard. And they're just blowing everybody away with this. It paints beautifully, handled all of this without any kind of hiccups at all. No splatters, no spitting, no nothing, no blockages, no. And this is probably, I would say realistically, about 20 to 30 minutes of airbrushing, with about a half hour to 45 minutes of cutting the stencil, transferring the stencil to the base, and then doing that painting in between with the white, and then getting into black. So probably about an hour and a half total work to get a full base completed. Now, I complained about it a little bit in the beginning because it is kind of a tedious process, but to complete a full base for competition work in less than 2 hours at this, whatever, and you're only paying, I mean, once you have the stencil cutter, it begins to pay for itself, and that's the other side of that versus going out and getting plaques made and some other stuff in more traditional manners. And if you know me, and you guys probably do, RSP, I always do stuff a little bit, off a skew. I don't do traditional bases or that kind of stuff, and so I felt this was a really kind of stylistic way to do it, but also kind of classic and really clean. I love how clean this looks when it's done, and this is really the kind of the final step, the big reveal. It's what we all like about masking is the removal, right? Because let's get this over with. And all I'm doing here and is throughout the whole entire process is I've just got a hobby knife, and all you're doing is you're just gently lifting the edge of that vinyl up, and then grabbing it with your tweezers, and then pulling gently off, and the vinyl will tear and rip and all that stuff. It's not reusable like we're used to from like a DN Models or an Edward Stencils or something like that. So there's not going to be a reusable piece. But at the prices that you're paying for the vinyl pieces, trust me, it's like 50 cents. No big deal. And this is really what it is. Just did the full review, same thing. You know, take your time. Patience is a virtue. You know, don't do this after you had 3 cups of coffee. All those are relevant, and it comes up really clean. I was really happy with it. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong. It's not this at this point in time. I haven't perfected it, but I was really happy with the results here. And then you can see it's a little bit tough to see with the black painted thing over the black base and everything like that. So you just take your time, and then really good sharp tweezers helps too, by the way. And all I'm trying to do is not nick the white paint. So I'm just kind of gently flipping that up, grabbing with the tweezers, get the last period out for RSP. Boom, done. And I was happy. There's a walkthrough process with all of these on Patreon as well if you want a little bit more detailed video. Looks wonderful together. Here you go with the T72. So hope you guys like this one, and we'll do the white one next. We'll see you then. Thank you. Later. Bye. See you. Okay, I'm out. Peace.